So in that portion of that video, you saw this very nice, fast dog try to connect with the sleeve, but what happened was something very common with very young, especially fast dogs, and that is their mouths and their bodies don't move at the same rate. And there's a little bit of a coordination issue that happens as they're learning to connect. So with these young, fast dogs, what a lot of times happens is they get to the sleeve, they get to the target faster than their mouths are prepared for. Or sometimes their mouths move faster than their bodies get to the target. So in an ideal scenario, this is where most dogs, once they get this figured out, the way they do it is they go for the sleeve, right? So they go for the sleeve, their bodies will go into it, their mouths opening at the same rate as their arrival to the target, and it'll close just as it is making contact. So you have this nice, smooth movement of their bodies towards the target, and you have this nice coordinated movement of their mouth as it makes contact with the sleeve or with the object, with the ball, any of those things. And this is a coordination picture. When you don't have that and the body and the mouth are slightly out of sync, it affects their contact to the sleeve. And so what you end up having is you end up having a dog, like in this particular video, you end up having a dog that gets to the target and their mouths are moving at a different speed. So either they'll get to the target as their mouths are already closing because they didn't time that right, so as their mouths are closing, right? And so now when they get to the target, they don't have this nice full mouth open. What they have is they have their mouths already starting to close because they timed it a little bit off. And then they end up biting, they're striking rather, they end up striking very, very shallow because now mouths are either closing or they're just starting to open. This is a problem with coordination, and it is very common with very young dogs. They're learning a skill. They're moving at a very fast pace to the target, and so they're learning to sync those moving parts together so that by the time they get there, everything's nice and smooth. This is not a huge problem. It does get addressed through experience. So by doing it over and over and over, just like any skill, if I, for instance, tell you, hey, just shoot this basketball, right? Just shoot this basketball to that, to that basket. Or if I give you a ball and I tell you, go ahead and kick that ball to, to that goal line, whatever it is, anything that involves movement, well, your coordination is not always going to be right. If I have you do martial arts and you've never done it, if I have you do some jab crosses and you've never done that, your stance, your feet, and your hands are going to move at a slightly different pace. You're going to be uncoordinated, and it's going to look a little bit off until you get enough repetitions where your body now syncs all the moving pieces together so it looks nice and smooth. It is no different for dogs, and some dogs tend to be a little bit more coordinated than others, just like people, and some dogs have a little bit less of a coordination than other dogs. And so you end up having some of these issues. It's very common in my experience with younger dogs that happen to be a little bit fast. Do me a huge favor, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with somebody else. So how do we address it? We basically just do repetitions, repetitions, repetitions. Now these repetitions can be on sense, or these repetitions can be through something a little bit more controlled like the bungee. What the bungee does in this specific picture, in this particular case, is it slows the dog down a little bit. And so the reason it does that, and the reason I like to utilize that, is that the bungee allows them to slow down a little bit so that their mouths can kind of move at the same speed as their bodies, because without a bungee, a lot of times they just get there so fast that their brains haven't quite registered that, and so their mouths are just all over the place. But with a bungee, you get a little bit of a slower approach, and as they're getting there, they have a little bit of time to process what they're to do with their mouths. So that is why I like to use the bungee when it comes to dogs like this. I've had this happen with other clients, other club members, and this is a good way to get those repetitions, but have their bodies move in a bit of a more controlled manner. Now, you're going to see lack of coordination, not just with protection dogs, not just with sport dogs, not just with dogs that you throw in the ball. You see it with a lot of dogs. Probably seen some of these videos, or you might know a dog or have a dog that when you toss them a treat, their bodies don't move all in sync. So you can see that as you toss them a treat in the air, they're trying, they're actually making the motions to catch the treat in the air. But what happens is they either don't open their mouths in time, or maybe they open it too soon, and then by the time their mouth's closed, the treat's already hit them in the face. You see that, right? You see the same thing with dogs that you're throwing a ball to, you're throwing a frisbee to. Sometimes their mouths and their bodies just don't move at the same speed, and so as they're chasing the ball, as it's kind of bouncing or moving in midair, you see the dogs sometimes will try to grab the ball, and you hear the clank of their teeth. You hear that snapping sound of their teeth, and they haven't even touched the ball. Now, you do have a moving object, a moving target, but essentially it's the same thing. Whereas you grab that same dog with a little bit more experience, so you do this over and over and over, eventually that dog will get better at catching the treats. That dog gets better at grabbing the ball in midair. You see that, and this is the learning process. They learn through experience, but they have to get that by doing it a bunch of times. And sometimes you can't get around that. There is no magic technique that in one repetition or two repetitions the dog's going to be suddenly amazing. Now, there are some techniques, there are some tactics. So as the dog is dragging, we could also do a drag. And so as the dog is dragging, the dog is slowing down. The dog is thinking about the movement of their mouths as they're grabbing the target. I could also compensate for that by moving backwards or moving forward a little bit, so that way the dog catches the sleeve or the tug just at the right time. So these are little strategies that we can utilize, but it boils down to we have to do it again and again and again, and the dog has to practice it just like any skill, right? If I tell you shoot that basketball 100 times and do it 100 times for the next 2 weeks, at some point towards the end of those 2 weeks, you will get better at it. You'll be a little bit closer, a little bit more accurate than you were previously, provided that you have the right technique and the right coaching, of course. It's the same thing with a dog that is learning how to catch the treats in the air. You do this a bunch of times, which that's how you basically teach them to catch it properly, is you do it over and over and over. At some point, they learn to coordinate and they learn to sync their bodies with the movement of their mouths so that they're able to catch the treat in the air. And same thing with a dog learning how to catch the ball in midair. These are all elements of repetition, 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 and practice makes perfect.